to the Business of Hustling podcast. Super excited to be here. A lot of thought has gone into this podcast before. I'm Josh Foote.
I'm Ryan Foote.
And together we're the Foote Brothers. You probably could have caught that from our last names. Anyway, Business of Hustling podcast is going to be tailored towards entrepreneurship, business in all different forms. Lots of different fun guests coming up, lots of different businesses we've been a part of, and lots of different things kind of like that.
Yeah, business has always been an exciting topic in our family. Growing up, our father owned multiple businesses and was an entrepreneur himself, and we've kind of taken an interest in that and kind of used it to frame our lives out. We're excited about this podcast. We have some cool people that we want to interview in the future that are entrepreneurs or have been a big influence in our life. The reason we've chose the Business of Hustling as a name is because to be an entrepreneur, to start a business is all about hustling. It's about working your butt off, trying to make it, and kind of almost an aspect of fake it till you make it. There's multiple times where Josh and I have started a business and didn't know really what we were doing. And we just kind of faked it, talked to people, acted like we knew what we were doing, and it paid off. Other times they called our bluff and it didn't work out so well for us. But we're excited for what there is. Sorry, Josh.
Now, one thing I was going to say is through the thick and thin, it's been tons of fun. We've learned a lot of lessons and still learning every day. And we've had a lot of different experiences in business that we're excited to bring to this podcast. Anyway, so like Ryan said, the Business of Hustling is all about going out there and doing it, making something from nothing. We have together and separately done different businesses and have different experiences, which we'll talk about in future podcasts. But today, specifically, we're going to talk about flipping items, specifically on the market of Craigslist.
Right. So that's kind of how Josh and I started back in high school. We would scout Craigslist. It was kind of before there was the Facebook marketplace, or eBay's good, but it was just harder to get those quick deals. And so we started just learning from Facebook. Our cousin actually is kind of the one that introduced us to this. He would buy cars and different items off of Craigslist, and it was interesting to us. So Craigslist is an awesome platform for selling and buying multiple things. There's so many things on there. People list the most random stuff, but they also list a lot of good things. And so really the biggest thing is just watching every day and finding deals that pop up, and then knowing what your price point is and knowing what you want and what you're looking for. And it's pretty easy to narrow it down on Craigslist.
Awesome. One thing, Ryan, that I get a lot of is people see me using Craigslist to make money, and they kind of think it's kind of crazy. There's stuff all over the internet about making money on Craigslist or make $500 this month on eBay or whatever it is. And this isn't a get rich quick scheme. There's a lot of work that goes into it. There's definitely an algorithm that you got to figure out for your market, which we'll talk about. But what exactly is flipping? I mean, we know what Craigslist is, Ryan, but what exactly is flipping something?
So ultimately, flipping is buying a product or buying something for cheap or for low and selling it for more than you paid. So that can range from making only $20 off of something or, making a couple $1,000 depending on what the item is. And so in my book, that's really what flipping is. And what it comes down to is at the end of the day is buying low, selling high.
Absolutely. And one thing that's kind of cool about it is there's all these shows on TLC or HGTV or whatever they are about flipping homes, flipping houses. And that's literally what we're talking about in this episode, only on a smaller scale. You can work up from something, like Ryan said, like a $20 flip to a small nightstand or something to something large like cars or motorcycles, RVs, and then work your way up to houses, or maybe you find a niche that you like to be in. So it's really universal. There's a lot of money to be made if you know what you're looking for.
Yeah, totally. And so, Josh, when we talk about flipping, I think the biggest thing for people, I know it was for us when we started out, was kind of figuring out how to flip. You know, you talk about flipping a house, and that's such a big undertaking. There's a lot of money on the line. But then you mentioned earlier, and we kind of touched on it, a $20 flip where you only make $20 per flip. How do you get started? What do you look for? How do you read the market? How do you know what is a good buy, what's a bad buy, and how to differentiate between the two.
Well, when we first got into it, obviously we were high school kids, and we didn't have a lot of extra cash floating around. So one thing that we looked for is something we knew. One thing that that we both knew, me and Ryan both worked in this bike shop growing up. In high school, all throughout high school. So we really knew bicycles. And then one thing is we kind of just had a passion for motorcycles and dirt bikes, or something like electronics, cell phones, computers, where we kind of had a good understanding of what things were worth. And so getting that basis, a lot of it at first was kind of understanding our market. So I'd get online, see what new bikes were selling for. We'd get on eBay, see what the sold listings were for, get on Craigslist, kind of see what the market was, and kind of go from there to see what of the value of an item was when it was sold, and then kind of work backwards from there.
Right. Yeah. I think that was the biggest thing for us to get going is finding something that you enjoy. And so, like Josh said, was motorcycles, quads, ATVs, and bicycles. I think the biggest thing, too, is a lot of the time you can buy low is because the product is damaged or has a flaw of some sort. And so there was times where Josh and I would buy a motorcycle, and they said, we rode it last summer, and we parked it all winter, and we went out and tried to fire it up, and it wouldn't start. It sounded like it wanted to, but it wouldn't kick over. And on something like that, they would be willing to come down on price when Josh and I both knew that it most likely was just a carburetor issue. We could pop the carburetor bowl off, we could clean it out, and it would fire right up no problem, and we could sell it for a few $1,000s more than what we paid for it. But you're trying to find what the value is worth to you, worth to the seller, and worth to the market. And so, Josh, how do you find that true value? Because you see someone post a dirt bike online for $1,000 more than what it's going for on eBay. Like you said, you use the eBay listings. How do you truly know what to price your item at, what the going rate is for that item?
Absolutely. And one thing I want to touch on, one thing that I liked about flipping the motorcycles and stuff is it's super fun to ride that stuff around in the meantime of flipping it. So there's a lot of fun to be had with this as well. But finding the true value of an item really comes down to negotiating, kind of being bold and putting yourself out there. When we first were getting started, there's a lot of people that we'd offer a price that was less than the market value, because we knew we were going to clean it up. We were going to rebuild the carburetor, like Ryan said, and go there. So a lot of it was a lot of mistakes were made at the beginning, just because we were trying to learn that market. One thing that I like that Ryan said is absolutely not taking advantage of people. Some people think that, but one thing that we're really good at is spotting deals on Craigslist where it is something like a carburetor where that person, it's not worth their time to fix the carburetor. They don't want to. Or if we're buying a car, well, the seats are all disgusting, so we're going to have to reupholster them. So you can do small little things like that to increase the value. But actually selling so once you are able to find the true value of it by just negotiating, just texting people, calling people, saying, hey, where are you at with the price? One thing I love doing is going to the eBay sold listings. So you go to eBay, search for your item on the listings part of it. And then over on the left or right, depending on if you're a mobile or computer, you can click sold and completed listings, and actually it will tell you what the item sold for and when. Now, this is great because it gives you kind of a base value of what you're looking for, but you also have to keep in mind of where the item is. Obviously, a snowmobile is going to sell more in Alaska than it is in Hawaii because they're useless in Hawaii. So you got to kind of understand that. One thing, Ryan, that we've kind of struggled with over time and now we're good at it, is listing the item for what we think it is. Because the whole idea is getting it under market value and selling it for market value or above. So when you're trying to price an item, Ryan, bounce this back over to you. What do you look for in pricing an item? That value, including flaws of the item, including what other things are selling for. How do you value yours? Because let's say we're selling a 1989 Honda Spree scooter, and we think the other ones are selling for $300. There's one that's sold on eBay for $250, one that's sold for $350, and there's 6 listed on Craigslist for $600 in our area. But ours has a rip seat and the other ones don't. I mean, what's your process of going through and finding that true price?
Right, and going back real quickly to touch on on selling something, it's per market. We started out in Reno, Nevada. That's where we're born and raised. I currently live in Arkansas. We've lived in Utah. We've lived in Idaho. And you could buy something and sell it for what that Honda Spree would sell for in Idaho is different than in Reno, like Josh said with the snowmobile example from Alaska. And so I think it's really just looking and there's not just one specific formula for what to price it at. We have to you look online. And so basically one of the biggest things with selling something is how strong are your negotiation and how quickly do you need to get rid of that item. So there's been times, right, Josh, what was that one? We bought a motorcycle. I can't remember. Was it a Kawasaki Ninja? It was a little yellow thing. We bought it from some guy just outside of town, and we rode it around. And I don't remember. Can you give me more details on those or what that was?
I don't. I remember the motorcycle was tons of fun. We bought it from some guy for real. I can't remember the situation, but we bought it for way under market value. He was moving and couldn't take it with him, something like that. Right. I think he was moving the next day, and he sold it to us for pretty cheap.
Right, and so on that we looked, and there was a ton online for $1,000, $2,000 more than what he was asking. So if I remember correctly, we rode it around all summer. We rode it to Lake Tahoe. We had fun, and we put it on there. I think we listed it for a couple $100 more, if not like $5,000 or $6,000, $1,000 more than what other people were going for, and we didn't get any hits on it. And so basically, we listed it high, and the reason we did that is because we wanted to play on it for some time. We got such a good deal that we knew that we could ride it around, put some miles on it, and then come back and sell it at the end of the summer and still make a decent profit on it. And so on that one, it was pricing it high. And you I think one of the biggest things, at least for me, my indicator on price of the market is don't be afraid to list it a little bit higher than other people. If you can sit on it for a little bit, if you don't need that cash, list it for $100 more, depending on the item, $20 more, and sit on it. If no one texts you, it's always easier to drop in price than it is to list it for $80, have 15 people message you about it, and then say, shoot, I wish I would have listed it for $100 and sold it for $100.
Absolutely, and that's really key to the flipping is really knowing your market, knowing the item you're buying, and buying low and selling high. That's the whole thing. But Ryan, on Craigslist, how do you? I guess going back specifically to Craigslist, what we're talking about, how do you find what do you look for on Craigslist when you're trying to find? How do you narrow something down? Do you just open up and go general all and kind of scroll through, or are you looking for something specifically, or how do you find that item to make money on? Because there's so many of them. Yeah,
totally. I think right now what I'm doing, so actually out here in Arkansas, my wife and I just moved out here. Furniture, mostly dressers and nightstands, they sell so fast out here. It's such a hot market. And so one thing that I do is I narrow my searches in for dressers, nightstands, furniture that I can buy for less than $100. I can sell and only make $40, $50 on it. But I'm having so many sales each day or each week that it's okay. I'm willing to do that. Whereas in Reno, cars was a hot market and motorcycles. And so I think it really depends on as we talked about earlier, Josh, we talked about how biking and motorcycles was kind of how we grew up. We knew that industry pretty well. So I think it's mostly just finding out what you want to flip, what's the going item in the market. Furniture sells really quick out here. Motorcycles sell. Go ahead.
Let me ask you this then, Ryan. So you moved out there. Out here, we flip bicycles and Honda scooters and stuff like that left and right. Out there, how did you find that furniture is the hot thing? How can our listeners find what's hot in their market?
That's a really good question. I think one of it was because I was familiar with furniture. It was just, I think one of it, part of it is luck. It's looking online. So Facebook has a really good application to their mobile device app right now. It's just called the Marketplace, and which allowed me to kind of see that a lot of people were purchasing furniture. They had there's a lot of listings for furniture. I had messaged them on it, and they would say, hey, it's pending pickup, or hey, you've got 4 people in line before you can buy it, or ahead of you in line that want it. And so I think out here, that's kind of how it started. Is I just found, my wife and I were trying to buy nightstands, and that was it. And so I messaged a few people on nightstands I thought was a good deal, and they came back and said, hey, sorry, it already sold. And so it's the same thing for cars in Reno. We knew that people had that income. They wanted to buy cars, but they didn't want to buy new. And so I don't know. How would you go about saying that? I guess that's a hard question that I wasn't really prepared for. I think it's just trying to boil it down to the roots of how we started. We just said motorcycles and bikes was what we wanted to do. And then we kind of would look at the generals and say, oh, this person's selling an Xbox. I don't know much about Xbox. And then we'd go do some research, say, oh, that looks like a good deal. We'd buy it and then sell it. And I can't even begin to tell you how many items I've bought that I've actually lost money on. Wouldn't you agree, Josh?
Yeah, there's definitely some risk there. One thing, that is a tough question of how to find something that you can flip. I mean, obviously, in any market, if you can find something cheap enough, you can make money on it. If you can buy it undervalued. But like you said, it's harder because you're waiting and waiting and waiting. You want something that flips pretty quick.
And I think a big aspect of it, Josh, is risk. I mean, you and I are a little different. As you're kind of more of a go-getter, and I'm more of I like to have more of a method to my madness before I execute sometimes. But Josh, just doing business with him, he's more, let's jump both feet in, and I'm more, I'll test the water before I do it. So I think a big aspect of it is just how risky you want to be. Buy multiple items and try and sell them. If you lose $100 or $2,000, you learn.
Absolutely. And one thing I think we've kind of did, maybe it's the same out in Arkansas when you're flipping the nightstands, is when we kind of started, we kind of bought a whole bunch of different items in different niches and saw what sold the most and the quickest and had the biggest returns. And we're like, okay, these three computers, cars, and Honda Sprees or whatever it is, those are the best. So let's look for those and let's have that be our thing. And I keep talking about Honda Sprees, and we've flipped several Honda mopeds. One of my favorite things to flip just because they're so fun to ride in the meantime.
You went to school up in Idaho? Sorry if you're going to change topic real quick. Was it cell phones or what? It was computers. I can't remember, but you were buying them and selling them within the same day. How did you figure out what was that item and how did you figure it out? I can't remember.
So what you're talking about is, it was actually Apple MacBooks of all different years. Right. I went up to a small college town in Idaho, and so there's a lot of people that towards the end of the month needed cash for rent because they didn't have it. And so one thing a lot of people do is if they need money, they try to find something to sell. And so a lot of people, they'd have brand new laptops and they'd have old ones that sat there for 1, 2, 3 years, whatever, and they needed cash at the end of the month to pay rent or cash for whatever it was because everyone was poor. It was a small little college town. And so what I would do is I'd buy these MacBooks for super cheap because they needed the money. And so it wasn't...
When you say super cheap, what are you saying? Sorry. What's super cheap on? Sorry.
No, you're good. So typically, I would say I'd make about $100 to $150 per laptop that I flip. Okay. So super cheap, about $100 less than market value, which isn't a ton. But if you're doing several of them a week or a month, it can add up.
But even though it's not a ton, it's still just supplemental. If you have a full-time job or if you're a student, extra $100 to go on a date or to go out bowling or to go pay for gas for your car is awesome.
Absolutely. And so that's exactly, and that's what I did is I found that niche because I had bought one actually that I was going to use myself. And I can't remember the situation, but for some reason I actually not even ended up needing it. And, I put it back up for sale and I sold it super fast. And I think that one I bought it because I wasn't trying to flip it. I just bought it. So I got a decent deal, but it wasn't, super great. And then when I sold it for more than the market value because there's such a hot commodity up there. But because they're a hot commodity, at the end of the month, everyone wants to sell them to get the cash. So I could buy them for cheap at the end of the month. And then after that, when people were kind of stable again, I'd sell them because everybody wanted them or needed them. So it's a pretty good flip. One thing I want to touch on, Ryan, is you said this isn't a jump in with both feet. I mean, you can, but it's not a full jump in and quit your day job. This is supplemental unless you're trying to do it full time. I mean, what can you tell me about not trying to think this is a full-time gig? Or maybe it is. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think your example when you're up at school in Idaho, just buying laptops here and there, I think one of the reasons, or just touching back on finding good deals, is being available. I can't tell you how many times someone said, hey, I can't come till the weekend, and they're willing to pay me. And then someone's like, hey, I'll come tonight. And they get a better deal because they're willing to come tonight. Or for me, the guy will say, hey, someone wants it on Saturday. I didn't set it in stone or make a deal with them. So if you want to come tonight, you can take $10 off. And so, sorry, what was your question? I just totally got sidetracked.
I got sidetracked as well. I can't remember. So much for keeping tabs on what we're talking about.
I just get so excited about flipping.
Well, this is a fun topic that we like. Oh, it was about
jumping in with both feet.
Full time, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think I've never done it full time. It's never been, I've always had a job or I've always been in school. But I think the biggest thing or the coolest thing with flipping items, especially on Craigslist, is it's easy to scale. You can buy something and only make $20, or in your instance, laptops, you're only making probably $100, $200, maybe $300 a week. But that's $1,200 a month. That pays for rent. That pays for your mortgage. That pays for car insurance and gas. And so I think, Josh, you and I, we started pretty small. We'd buy a motorcycle for $800 and we'd sell it for $1,000 a couple weeks later. So we were making only a couple $100, but there were some items that we would buy, as we got more riskier, as we kind of understood the market better, or the whole background or underlying foundation of flipping on Craigslist, we'd buy cars. And so I think it's really your level of risk. Everyone has a level of risk with what they're comfortable with. And so I think if you're more risky and you feel more comfortable or confident in yourself, jump in both feet and kind of, make a few more risks. Or the nice thing about it is you can start small. You can buy a nightstand and make $20, or you can buy a car and make $30,000. It really depends. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I love that. And that's, you see all these different shows like we talked about as flipping houses on TV, or like there's a show called Fast and Loud, I think, or Gas Monkey Garage, something like that, where they buy cars for cheap, they fix them up, and they sell them and make these huge profits. I mean, this is something that people do for a living all the time, and it's so interesting that they put it on TV. Or I love it that you can just start small. And one thing I want to touch on is you say we bought a motorcycle. We started small, bought a motorcycle for $800. Some people, that's a lot. That they don't have $800. You can start with anything. But one thing is we bought $800. It's like we weren't in risk of losing a ton of money on it, because we knew, worst case, we knew we could at least sell it for $800. We knew we could at least get our money back out. And
or
it wasn't
lose
like
$100. We were comfortable with losing $100 on that.
Exactly. And we didn't jump in with starting to buy like 2015 Harleys. We were buying like 1979 Yamaha Viragos, like whatever we could find and make money on, we'd buy.
But I think another thing too is one thing that I recently bought that I did was I found a bunch of old Pokemon Game Boy games. Some dude had them. He didn't know the value of them, and just they were his kids. He was an older guy. He said, I would rather have them out of my house. I'm sure someone would like them. I bought them for 88 cents a piece, and I ended up selling them for just under $20 a piece. And so even like that, it's something small, but in my garage, I have a motorcycle that you can flip. That's a big ticket item. And so I think even still at this point, Josh, wouldn't you agree that even though we have we're trying to make more margins right now, we go back and forth. We buy cheap, and then we also, smaller ticket items as well as bigger ticket items.
Yeah, I love that. One thing is, I mean, when I'm looking for something to flip, I'm like, go to Craigslist, I find a specific thing. And so sometimes I just open up generals to see what's in there, but I'm like, hey, I know computers and cell phones really well. I know motorcycles and cars pretty well enough where I'm confident to flip them. But that being said, I go to that specific page on Craigslist and kind of look through what I know. And I specifically know on motorcycles, I know Hondas, and I specifically Shadows, Viragos, those types of bikes. I know their value. I've owned several of them. And so that's a specific thing. But that being said, if I'm on here and there's a Honda Shadow, or there's a Kawasaki Ninja, like that one we were talking about, the little yellow one, I'm not limited to that certain brand or bike. But then if I'm at a garage sale and I'm looking at Pokemon games, it's like, well, I know I can make money on these. It's like, and it's easy too. It's like, okay, I'll buy these for $5 and you sell them for $100 or whatever it is. It's easy. So I'll branch out as long as I know. And sometimes, like the Pokemon games, I'm sure you probably didn't know the exact value, but for $5, it's probably worth the gamble to you.
Right. And real quickly on that, I think a big part of it is the time. If you don't have a lot of free time, it's easier to make one sell and make $400 than a bunch of little ones that you make $20 on. And so I think there's a lot of factors that factor into this, and I think time is a big one. And also I think eBay is a great resource. I know we have another podcast that we want to do on eBay, all about how to flip on eBay. But that just gives you even a wider audience. And so I have a couple other Game Boy games that I actually have listed on eBay that I'm having a hard time just selling locally. Anyway, so going back to the time, it really depends on, is it worth your time? So real quickly on the topic of time, if there was 2 motorcycles, Josh, on Craigslist, and one had an issue, say there were 2 identical 1988 Yamaha Viragos, one had an issue, the guy just said, it may need a battery, it may need a carb clean, whatever, and you had another one that was a more expensive, but it was a complete bike. How do you choose whether or not you want to buy something that's a little bit more broken or have issues, or whether you buy one that's just ready to go, that's more turnkey, that you could just get and flip?
That's such a great question, because I look at several things. I mean, if it depends on the time you have, the time that you want to spend on fixing it up and things like that. The profit, I'm guessing the one that's in pristine, or not pristine, but it's in good condition, that's turnkey, you can flip it. I'm guessing you'll be able to sell that a lot quicker, but you may not have as big a return as one you got to fix up. And one thing that we did is when we started, at least for me, like Honda scooters are a prime example. Hondas run forever. I love Hondas for that reason. They're so easy to fix and flip and everything. And so I'd buy one that was in good condition, or we'd buy one that was in good condition that needed a seat reupholstered. And we'd go down to the fabric store, get vinyl and do it ourselves, and it'd look great, and we'd sell it. And then we started doing more and more where it was, okay, this one needs a new tire. Okay, that's easy. We can replace the tire. Well, this one needs the carb rebuilt. Well, okay, we can rebuild the carb, and kind of keep going. And so I think it's just depending on what your capabilities are, because the one that's a little bit more broken that you can fix, people look at it and say, hey, this one's broken, I'm going to sell it for a lot less. But there's also a lot bigger profit to be made on that one. But it comes down to how much do you know about the object? And so I think over time you can gauge that and go a little bit farther each time.
Right. And even on that, there's sometimes that I've bought something that had an issue. There's those 2 Honda Elite scooters, 80s, that we bought a couple summers ago. We bought 2 of them from this person. They had them in their garage, and they both had issues, and they were carbs. But on a Honda 80 that year that we bought, I don't remember exactly what it was, the way they built the motor and into the frame of the scooter, it was super hard to get the carb off, and it wasn't worth our time. And so we just actually turned around. They started. We were able to get them to start, but we just turned around and sold them broken. We said, hey, we know that there's probably a carb issue. I think one thing too with Craigslist, real quick, this is a side topic, is honesty. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to buy something and I got a weird feeling about the guy that he was lying about something, and I didn't buy it. There's other times where I bought something, the guy totally lied to me, and it ended up costing me a couple $100. And so honesty is huge. If you're selling something, be an honest person. If you know there's an issue, make it vocal. Let that person know.
And that's such a great reminder. I mean, and that goes with everything in life. I mean, if a business and school and work and everything you're doing is just being honest. I know sometimes for me at least, and I know Ryan's the same way, is like when we're selling something, I would never be able to be like a scummy salesman, because I'm like every time someone comes, I'm like, well, look at this nick over here. This, I mean, I don't try to say, I know there's wear and tear, but if there's something big, I'm like, hey, I want you to be aware of this, not because I'm afraid the guy's going to come back and call me and be like, hey man, you're a jerk, but because I want to be able to sleep at night and be like, hey, I was totally honest, which kind of goes back to you're not ripping people off at all. It's just you're taking something, an issue.
It's your business.
Exactly. Okay, Ryan, I want to go through really quickly the process of flip. I know we've talked about a lot of different things. So you're on Craigslist. You found your market. Let's tell you, we're going to go after a 1984 Yamaha Virago. Great, we know that. You're going to go out there, and what do you do from there, negotiating wise? I mean, you have to negotiate when you buy the item, and you have to negotiate when you sell the item, and that's kind of a scary thing. I know I was really uncomfortable when we first did it, but give me your thoughts on that. Obviously, you're there that's what you're there to do, but it's kind of awkward sometimes. What do you think?
Right, yeah, I totally agree. So one thing I think that you can't be afraid of is to ask questions. And so oftentimes you'll be like, I'll apologize to people. I'll say, sorry, I'm asking so many questions. So if I'm on Craigslist and I see a listing for Yamaha Virago 1984, whatever year, and it looks like it's a decent price or decently priced, sometimes it's a little high, and I'll try and entertain myself by asking about it. But there's 2 guides online for vehicles. There's kbd.com, Kelly Blue Book, and there's another one called NADA, NADA guides.com. They're excellent. they have a database built out, and you can search specifically to your zip code. But I think a big misconception with this is that people think that is the going market rate of whatever item it is. It's not. It's a very good guideline for what it is, but sometimes things are selling for more or less depending on that. So if I find a Yamaha Virago that I want to buy, I'll go very first, I'll go online and look it up, the value on KBB, or actually for motorcycles, we use Nauta Guides because it's just more of a complete database for that. I'll look it up and then I'll start texting the person that the owner of the vehicle or the motorcycle. And so obviously with a motor, it's a little bit more. If it's a furniture, I'll ask them, is it damaged? Is there any issues with any scratches? Is it steady? Is it stable? With a motorcycle, you ask how long have you owned it? Have you had any issues? Why are you selling it? Don't be afraid to ask the obvious questions or questions that you think are dumb, because oftentimes that will give you, sometimes I've texted someone, why are you selling it? Oh, well, I bought it last month and my wife doesn't want me to have it. There's a good chance that there's something wrong with it. And that's why they're trying to sell it. And so obviously you want to give people the benefit of the doubt. But I'll look online, I'll start texting the person, get some more information. And then sometimes it kind of depends. Josh, how do you know whether or not you want to negotiate through text message? The world we grow up in right now, it's mostly you're texting people. You're not calling them on items. Sometimes I'll call if it's a bigger ticket item. But how do you differentiate between talking to them price-wise in person or over a text?
Well, I'll tell you what, when we first started, what we would do is we never texted price. We always, at least, right. Maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but
no, it was always in person.
It was always in person. We always went to the item. We always negotiated then. And honestly, I don't remember the last time I've negotiated with someone in person, and not including over the phone, but in person, I'd drive out to the item and look at it. Because it's so easy to look at text. And so typically what I do is I negotiate with them over text and say, would you take this? And we kind of go back and forth if we need to. And then I show up and I verify the item and say, okay, dude, there's actually a scratch right here. And then you can kind of renegotiate if you need to. But at least that way you're not driving 30 minutes to go look at a motorcycle that is beaten to crap without, and then you get there and you're like, I want to spend $800, but the guy won't budge from $1,500 or $1,200 or whatever. And so texting, it seems like it saves a lot of time and energy. And then you can even renegotiate more if you need to. And people that are selling something and has an issue after negotiating, they know you're going to come and try to haggle them down, negotiate them down anyway. They just want to get you there. So it's kind of a balance, and it's really individuals is what it comes down to.
I think also it's how comfortable are you negotiating? I'm a lot more comfortable. I feel very confident in my negotiation skills in person on items that I know a lot about. There's other items that I don't, so it's easier just to text, like you said. I don't want to waste my time by driving an hour to look at something when the guy's already has it priced high and he's not going to budge. So sometimes I'll put a feeler out there and just ask, what's your bottom dollar? What are you thinking? And sometimes they'll come back with an offer and say, I'll come down $200. Other times they say, come out and look at it and make me an offer. And so I also think that if I'm trying to get something for a good deal, if I think the guy has it priced high and I want it for a good deal, I'll drive out there and I'll look at it if it's close enough, and I'll negotiate in person. That way he knows that I'm serious about buying it. I've got money in hand. He knows that I'm there looking at this item. I'm invested in the item. Whereas texting it, sometimes I don't give people the time of the day when they text me because I'm like, you aren't very serious about it. You're just trying to, lowball me. And
Great
so
thoughts.
I think, it's coming back and forth between what you're comfortable with, kind of reading every situation different.
Great thoughts. Okay, so you've got the item. You've done the negotiation, whether over text, whether in person. You read the situation. You've got the item. You fix the item to whatever it is. We've talked about pricing the item to the conditions that we think. So where do you go from there? You've got this item. You think you've got a good price. Then what do you do? I mean, where do you go? You put it back on Craigslist. You try to put a for sale sign in your. I mean, how do you sell it from there?
Craigslist, or like I said earlier, Marketplace on Facebook is phenomenal. You can break it down by searching a mile outside of your zip code up to 100 miles. I don't know what the limit is on it. But yeah, so like on motorcycles, if I'm looking to buy a motorcycle, unfortunately, my wife says I have commitment issues because I've never owned a vehicle longer than a year. I think I've only owned one vehicle in my entire life for longer than 1 year. Most of them I buy, I drive them for a few months, and then my problem is, it drives my wife insane. I think it drives your wife insane too, Josh, is we try and sell everything. Like, we're trying to buy nightstands for our house right now, and my wife finally just texted me this morning and said, we're going to buy them new because that way you can't make any money on them. You're going to lose money if you try and sell them. And so we can finally keep some. I've bought probably 15 sets of nightstands, and we'll put them in our room, and then I'll just sell them. And my wife will come home from work and is like, "Are you kidding me? I need it." And so
I love it. I'm the same way. That's my mind with everything is I'm like, everything is what could I do with this in 6 months after I do it? And so that's kind of a curse too, is like, I'm like, we have a baby on the way and we're trying to find another car that's more suitable for a family. And I can't just go out and buy one because I'm like, in 2 years when we're done with this, in 3 years, and whenever we're done with this, I want to be able to at least break even and get my money back. But yeah, totally. I think that's great.
I think it depends on the item. If I'm buying something strictly to flip it and get quick cash, I'll go home. I'll take good pictures. I think that's a big, huge thing of getting people to look at your posts. Because most of the time, unfortunately, I list things higher than what I think they're worth. I'll just go up in price. And it's because it's my way of negotiating. It's always easier to come down than to go up. A big, huge aspect of negotiating is people both sides of the party want to feel like they're getting the best deal. And so if I list something for $1,900 and I know that I'm willing to take $1,500, I can come down to $1,700 and then I can come down to $1,500. And that way that person feels like they're getting a good deal. And I also know that I'm getting a good deal. And so I'll list it high. And then it's also easy if you're not getting any hits on it to lower the price a little bit to make something where it's appealing. Go ahead.
I love that is every time I've done a deal with somebody, it's both every party involved feels like they got a good deal. And that's the essence of being a good negotiator and being a good deal maker is everybody involved feels like they got a good deal. Whether you're buying it, the guy that sells it, it feels like he's getting a good deal because it's got a broken carburetor. He just needs to get rid of it because it's moving. You feel like you got a good deal because you got it for cheaper. Then you sell it. You feel like you got a good deal because you made some money or you broke even or whatever it was if you're holding on to it for a little bit longer. And the guy that's buying it feels like he got a good deal because it's a fair market value. So I think that's a huge thing is everyone's a winner in this situation. No one's getting taken advantage of. It's a win-win-win for everybody involved.
Right. And so, it's making sure that you know what your margins are. You know what it's worth, what you're buying it for, and what you want to sell it for. So back to, I'll come home and I'll take good pictures. You have to have good pictures and clear pictures of your item. I can't tell you how many times I just have clicked past something because the pictures make an item look cheap or beaten up or thrashed. And so I'll take good pictures. I'll detail it if I need to. I'll make sure that I focus in if there's a scratch on the gas tank. I'll make sure that I put that on there. Because I want people, when they're texting me, especially if I've had people drive 2 hours to come buy something that I'm selling, and I would feel so bad if they showed up and said, "There's a huge dent in the gas tank, and you didn't tell me about that. How was I supposed to know? I just wasted my time, and now you know." And so depending on what the item is, if I keep it or if I want to sell it, I'll list it right away or I'll play with it and then list it.
Yeah, and I love that. One other thing with the picture sell, I mean, I'm on Craigslist. I don't even look at ads without photos. Right. Maybe I'm missing a bunch of stuff, but I'm like, it's just not worth my time. I'd rather look at photos. And along with the photos, great photos. That's what sells stuff is great photos. A picture's worth 1,000 words, but a great description of exactly what the item is and how I give a description, and I think you're probably the same way, Ryan, is when I'm doing a description, as I think, okay, I'm selling this specific item. If I saw this on Craigslist, what's every question I would text or call and ask this guy? And then I put everything in that description like that.
I like that, yeah.
Year, make, model, and then anything that's wrong with it. I want people to know from the get-go what they're negotiating on. I love that, to just be honest again. I mean, what are your thoughts?
No, totally. And sometimes the honest mistakes, I list something and they flipped it upside down in a weird angle in the lighting and it showed another scratch or a dent that I didn't necessarily see. So you have to make sure, inspect your item. I can't tell you how many times. Well, I guess it's not that often because I've gotten better in inspecting items. And we're talking more about vehicles, motorcycles, things that are, north of $1,000. Obviously if it's a little dresser or something, if you missed a scratch, it's not the end of the world. But on a motorcycle, if there's a dent underneath the gas tank, that can rust. It can ruin your tank, and then you're out. The bike's worthless at that point. And so just make sure that I don't even know what we're talking about. I just keep ranting on about stuff. What was your question?
No, just about being honest in the listing, saying exactly what the item is.
Yeah, totally. And being willing, if that person comes out, there's been times where people have come out and I don't want to say I judge that person, but they show up in kind of a beat up vehicle. And I'm not talking about people that are buying motorcycles. Like I said, out here in Arkansas, I've been doing a ton of furniture, and someone will show up and you can tell that they really need this nightstand or they really need this bed frame or something. And it kind of touched me a little bit. And I know that I'll still make some money, but I could make $100 or I could make 85. I'd rather make 85 and give that person a deal so that they can go home and improve their quality of life. And so I think, and that's the cool thing about Craigslist and flipping things, Josh, is every situation is unique and different, and it kind of is an exciting thing. You know, what the stories we get are crazy.
And I love that too. One thing is I love helping people. I know you do. That's how we were raised, is helping people. And obviously when you're doing something to flip, it's a way to make some extra cash or whatever. But there's a lot of cool people you meet along the way, a lot of different stories, a lot of ways you can help people, in a lot of different situations. It's pretty cool how to do that. And I don't know. And I know we ran and kind of lose our train of thought because it's just a fun thing. Flipping stuff on Craigslist just in general is like fun. I actually enjoy it. It's like soothing for me. It's like therapy, but a lot cheaper, right?
Totally. Hey, so back to the whole process of buying and flipping. You know, we were talking about that. You find the ad, you text them about it, you show up, you look at it, you finally negotiate a price, you buy it. Now you're home. You've listed it back on Craigslist and you have a buyer showing up. Say that buyer, Josh, has texted you a little bit. You guys have kind of talked about price a little bit. What tips do you have now for the actual, you are selling the item. You're no longer the buyer, you're the seller. Walk me through that. Tell me your thought process on all that.
All right. So one thing I do is I have the bottom dollar in mind. If whatever the listing is, I say if I will go this low, let's say a motorcycle, I'll go $1,500 on it. I've got it listed for $18. I will take $15 cash today. I will not do $1799.99. It's $1,800. And if I'm at 18 or above, I'll take it. And so one thing that I like about that is it allows me to negotiate with, I know my margins, I know what I'm going to make, and I know where my break even point, or not my break even, I know what my cutoff prices. And so one thing I do is I let the buyer bring up the price first. I let them walk around, do other questions. And then typically what they'll say is, well, you're asking this, you're doing this, whatever it is. And I say, yep, I've got it. I always say I've got it listed for this much. And that way they can kind of say, this is where I'm starting at. And then I kind of let the negotiations go from there. And sometimes they'll lowball you. Sometimes they come in. And we've been doing it for so long. I just read the person, honestly, and see if they want to negotiate. Most people hate negotiating. And so they'll come back at you and say, would you take 1,400? I'm like, well, I'll do 17. And say, meet me in the middle. I'm a big meet me in the middle person. I know other people hate it.
And it goes back to your thing about meeting in the middle. It makes both sides win.
Exactly.
Or at least feel like they're winning.
Exactly. Especially if you've negotiated 2 or 3 prices and if it's going to be a $50 difference, I'm like, I'd rather have the cash today instead of maybe get $50 more next week or whenever it is. So, obviously if you're at 10 grand and that guy's at 1, meeting you in the middle is probably not a great idea, but if you're $50 apart, it's a good way to get rid of stuff. And I just read the person, the situation, and people hate negotiating. You'll realize this, and you can play that to your advantage a lot of times is just reading the person, and honestly, just being a nice guy. That goes a long way is being a nice guy and realizing you're both there. It's not awkward to talk about price. You're both there to buy and sell something. So,
right. But for whatever reason, that is an awkward, I remember back in the day before texting was a big thing, and we'd call someone and then go meet them. And then you're like, so now that I've inspected it, let's talk about price. And it kind of almost feels awkward. But at the end of the day, there's an item. When you go to the grocery store and you walk up to the cashier, it's never awkward. She's going to tell you the price and you're going to pay it whether or not you want to. You made that decision a long time ago. So you made the decision that you want this item. At the end of the day, you know what you're willing to pay for it or what you're willing to sell it for, depending on what side you're on. And if that person wants to go for it, good. If not, all right. It's one of those things. But Josh, real quickly, I want to talk about safety of Craigslist. What are some tips you can give for being safe? Because there's child trafficking is a huge thing in our country right now, even throughout the world, not just our country, but throughout the world. And a lot of them come from Craigslist, people meeting up and people getting taken, or people, there was one in our neighborhood growing up. Someone sold a van to someone, and I don't know the full story or details, but they sold a van to this person, and the van was kind of a lemon, and this guy got ticked off and came back and sat outside of this person's home in our neighborhood. And I remember it was a huge thing. The sheriff would show up. There's cop cars all through our neighborhood because this guy he was ticked. He's pissed off that this guy ripped him off. So how can you be safe?
Craigslist is it's like you said. There's a video on it that I think Craigslist, but I don't know. But one thing is Craigslist is great. It's got a whole section. If you go to Craigslist.org, it's got a whole section of on the left side personal safety tips. Right. And there's also one about avoiding scams and fraud, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But read through that. One thing is, I always tell people where I'm going. I'm saying I'm going to meet this guy to buy this or sell this at the Walmart parking lot at 12:30, whatever. And then I always meet somebody in a public place with public people. Walmart parking lots are great if you park towards the front at noon or 2 in the afternoon. They're not so great if you park in the back at 8 at night. There's not a lot of stuff going on back there. So I always make sure I'm around people in a well-lit place with a lot of people around. Another thing is I always take somebody if I can. Whether it's you or another brother or a buddy or whatever it is, I always try to take somebody with me that can be there with me. And another thing is, honestly, just I don't go to people's homes. If I'm going to look at a car or something, I rarely have gone to people's houses, but I've always got 1 or 2 other people with me. And I've always go during the day and stuff. I would never go to somebody's house alone by myself unless I'd have to have somebody else. And honestly, just reading the situation, how does your gut make you feel? If you pull up and you're like, oh, something feels off, then leave. It's not, nothing is worth your life or anything unsafe to make a flip, or even if you want something to keep, but really just trusting your gut. What do you think? What would you say on that?
Yeah, totally. I think one thing that's actually really cool is Google. If you have a Gmail account, you can get, it's called a Google number. So they'll give you a phone number for your specific area code. And so I can get one in Reno with that area code, and I never have to use my number. And the thing is, like, I don't know. I'm not a tech guru. I don't know how easy it is to track people on your phone, but with a Google number, if someone's pestering you, it's a lot easier to block them off that and hide it than on your personal phone. So I think what you said is reading the situation. I never had people come to my house because I do have a wife, and there's kids that come over and stuff. And if someone came up and got ticked or walked in my house and saw that my wife was there or whatever, or saw that we have a nice TV or something, and you just don't ever want to be the victim of being targeted. There is one issue right now. I have a huge shed on the side of my house that I'm trying to sell. This isn't a flip. It was with the house when I bought it. And that's something that I can't just load in the back of my truck, drive down to the local Walmart and meet someone there. And so I'll try and vet the person before they'll text me on it, or instead of just texting, I'll actually call the person so I can hear their voice. I can talk to them in person. And I'll just make sure that they're really interested and try and find out more. And the great thing about Facebook and Instagram these days is if you get someone's name, you can learn a lot about that person very quickly.
For sure. And I like to think most people are good, but it's always good to be aware of your surroundings and who you're meeting. And just follow the safety tips. Follow the stuff that is on Craigslist, and you should be good.
Never be alone when you meet someone, ever.
Absolutely. Yep. A lot of it's common sense, but just be safe. So Ryan, we're kind of running out of time here, but there's so many things we've learned from flipping. I think a lot of it is entrepreneurial stuff. And we've done a lot of flips. Real quick, what's something cool that you flipped? What's something that stands out to your mind?
One thing that was pretty cool, and this isn't really necessarily a Craigslist one, is we bought a saxophone, and I actually sold it to some dude in Russia. So I got a smoking deal. Some lady was getting rid of a bunch of stuff. It was kind of a estate sale situation, but we knew her, so she gave us some pretty good sales. I put it up on eBay. I sold it, and I made like $500. And it was just cool that it was someone in Russia. I think another thing is we bought a 1974 Mustang. It didn't have brakes. We loaded it on a trailer. It was fun just to kind of go run around. We could only stop it with the e-brakes, so we didn't take it too far. But
I remember cool that one specifically. Ryan's doing a burnout around the corner going downhill without any brakes. That was a fun one. I like that.
Yeah, that was good. What about you, Josh? What was your favorite, or what's one that sticks out to you?
Yeah, sorry for cutting you off. One that sticks out to me, what was that van that we bought in Utah? A 1980-something
89
van.
or something like that. Yeah, Dodge Caravan.
Yeah, old Dodge. It was purple, no windows, kind of a creepy van. We actually bought it from a guy. He was actually living in it. A bizarre situation. I went down, negotiated the night before. He said, well, I'm going to the airport to fly to my parents' house, whatever, tomorrow. Pick it up tomorrow. We went and picked it up. And we gutted the whole thing and put carpet all over the inside. It was really cool, actually.
Super
we got
fun.
all the carpet for free. That was one that stuck out to me.
That was fun. And at the end of the day, that was one that we didn't necessarily make a ton of money on. I mean, we made, I don't remember, $800 on it, but it was more of the experience. It was a bonding time for us. We had fun. We were able to hang out with friends with it. It was something that we kind of just rallied around where we were living for a few months, and then we sold it, and it was fun. And I think that's really, that's what makes things cool on Craigslist is when you can buy something like we've bought in so many motorcycles or dirt bikes. We go out, we ride them, we have fun, and then we sell them. And we may not make a ton of money. We make enough that it pays for the actual thing. It pays for insurance if we need it, the gas, any damage we do to it to fix it. But it's the experiences and it's the fun things that come from it that makes me kind of want to keep flipping stuff on Craigslist. I know I'm never going to become a multi-millionaire from flipping things on Craigslist, especially making only a couple $100, but it's fun. You can have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, and you can ramp it up to do other things like we talked about, like flipping old cars. It's super cool. But yeah, and that's one thing is it's always like the van. We didn't even plan on buying it. I can't remember if you saw it or I did, but one of us texted then and was like, dude, go get this van. It was super cheap because the guy, he was leaving the next day. So there's a lot of stuff that we've found that it's like, we weren't even looking for this, but we tons of fun and it's a good deal. So why not?
Yeah, totally. So wrapping it up, we thank everyone for listening to us. I know we are long-winded and rant sometimes, but it's just because it's fun. And like we said, there'll be other people in the future that will come on and they'll be able to rant. But Josh, what is your daily tip for flipping?
One thing, a daily tip for mine, I think emotions when buying stuff and selling stuff. I remember when I bought my first motorcycle, I think I was just graduating high school, and it wasn't a flip. I just wanted a motorcycle so bad. And I had a thing in my head. I'm like, okay, I can't remember. I'm making up numbers. I'll pay $1,800 for a top dollar. I won't go a cent more. And I got there and the emotions took, I'm like, I want this so bad that I ended up paying like $300 more. And I think it was still a fair value, but I paid more than I wanted to for it. And I've noticed that when I sell stuff too, even if it's a flip, I'm like, oh, like the van. It's like that one, not particularly, but there's different like cars or vans or whatever, motorcycles. It's like, this was so much fun. I don't want to sell it. But at the end of the day, it's like, don't let your emotions get the best of you. You really are there to make the money. And so I think emotions are good. Listen to your emotions. But if you're doing one specifically for a flip, don't let it get the best of you. Even if you're buying something to keep, don't let if you're going to a car dealership and whatever it is, just have the price and don't be like, I want this so bad. Leave your emotions at home and just and think with your brain. What about you, Ryan? What's your daily tip?
Right. And real quickly off that, even selling stuff, sometimes I price things too high because in my mind, that's what it's worth. And the emotions get the best of me and I'll end up sitting on it for a few months without selling it. And
Great
so
thought.
Really, it's the emotions. I'd say my daily tip for Craigslist is to avoid scams. There are so many scams where basically what they'll do, the most popular one I'll see is they'll say it'll be an out-of-state area code. It'll be an out-of-state number. They'll text you and say, hey, I want to buy your thing. I'll pay you what your asking price. I can't make it there to look at it. I'm in New Jersey. You're in California. So I'll send you a check, but I'm going to send you a little bit extra. And then I have a moving company that's going to come up and pick up the item and they'll move it back for me. So basically, I'll send you extra on the check. So your asking price is $100. I'll send you $200. You'll take $100 of that, and then you'll just transfer it or write this other person the check when they come to pick up the item, or not even when they pick it up. They'll have you mail the check to someone else. So basically, you get this check in the mail. You go put it in your bank account, and before it gets flagged or bounces, you'll have already sent the check for $100 to the other person, and then you're out $100 and the check bounced, which ultimately hurts your credit. And you spot those because it's out of state. The grammar's really bad in the texting. They'll never call. If you ever are concerned or you think it's a scam, call the number. If they pick up and they're a human being, perfect.
And one thing on that, Ryan, is a lot of times they'll say, hey, is the item you have on Craigslist available still? Or they say, or it doesn't fit in the message. It'll be good grammar. Hello, I am interested in your whatever it is. You can tell it's like a robot call.
Right.
Or if you call them and they pick up and they don't really know the item. That's right. I got a buddy, and there's a lot of variations. I had a buddy in high school. His dad got taken for like $5,500 because of this. So one way to avoid it. How do you avoid getting ripped off in person when you're selling something? What do you take a check, take cash, take a cashier's check? What do you do?
Cash deals, 100%. Never take a check, even if it's a personal check. I've taken cashier's checks on like a vehicle because, it is easier to get a cashier's check for 10 grand than to have 10 grand in cash. But always make sure it's either a cashier's check, a money order, or just cash, straight up cash. Always do your dealings in person. Never do it over the phone unless, a unique situation. But if someone's trying to buy something in New York and you're from Nevada and it's a $50 dresser, there's an issue. So always cash deals in person. That's my advice.
Love it. And if you are going to sell something to somebody different, eBay's the way to go. Make an eBay listing and have it all run through eBay. And the other thing is, one real quick is, a cashier's check. At least for me, whenever I'm taking a cashier's check or money order, I always make sure I'm at the bank with them and see them get it from the teller. That's one. It's like, hey, unless they've got a buddy on the inside, I think you're safe.
Totally.
Well, fun stuff, Ryan. Thanks for a great podcast. Lots of exciting stuff coming up. This is episode 1 of many. A lot of fun guests we've got coming up. If you've got any guests or anything, let us know that you think we could have, or any fun topics, let us know. But other than that, thank you for listening to the Business of Hustling podcast, and we'll talk to you next time.
Have a good one, guys. Thank you.